Welcome to today's video. Today's project took me all day. It was such a big project, and I even simplified it. It was gonna be even more complex than it was, and I am so glad that I simplified it. I was gonna make layers and kind of treat it like a picture frame. You know, like there's the backing and the glass in the front, and then there's the frame around it. I was gonna treat it kind of like that, but just all layers of clay. And so I pre-rolled a crap ton of clay yesterday, and then I did this cutout. I sketched out what I wanted to do, and I cut it out. That way I had a little template to work with. But then rolling out this clay into like a big flat piece was awful. It was so awful. The clay kept sticking. If any of you know how to work with clay, give me tips. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just bullcrapping it as I go. And look at where this got me. It stuck to my table and ruined my first layer, and I got so upset. I was so devastated that this happened. It was, I don't want to say traumatizing, but it was not fun. It was so annoying to try to fix, but it helped me decide to work on a smaller canvas, basically. So I just used the chunk that was left, and then I made the next layer out of the leftover stuff, which worked out fine. And I would have cut all that beginning part out, but I feel like it's very important to include stuff like that. That was a hurdle for me, and if you attempt something like this, you know, you might experience something like that too, and I want you to know you're not the only one who clay does not like. Clay doesn't like me, even though I love it. But, you know, it happens. Luckily my little inside piece worked for cutting out the clay though. It still fit in the canvas, which was very convenient. And so that little fade right there, that was after I baked it. That was implying that I baked these. I baked them for 15 minutes because they're pretty thin, and then I just started painting. And the colors that I had available were very interesting to work with. I found it challenging for some parts and very exciting for others because of my color combinations and stuff and layering. And I used acrylic paint, so acrylic paint is water soluble, and so I was able to treat it kind of like a watercolor, which was very fun. And I just added, I don't even know how many layers. I kept painting some and then letting it dry and then coming back to it and painting over it and letting it dry and then coming back to it, and over and over and over again. Painting this thing took longer than the entire project took yesterday, I think. It took me all morning to do this, but it was so fun. I love painting and I love colors and stuff. So I really wanted to make the background look very distant, and the farther something is away, I don't know how to word that properly. Anyway, the more pale it is and more grayish and lightish it is. So I did add a little bit of color, but it was as pale as I could make it with the colors that I had. And the foreground I tried to make as bright as possible, so bright yellows and greens, and I used a pinkish, a pale pinkish base for the trees, so that they were, nice and bright, not just this dark brown that I had. And I just mixed them together while they were still wet to make a light brown. And then I added a little bit of orange to contrast the bluish background, because they're complementary colors. I wanted to add in some red somewhere because red is the complementary of green, but I feel like I would have ruined this if I tried to add red in somewhere, because I didn't exactly have a specific thing in mind for the red. I could have made this more fall themed, but I didn't want to ruin it. I liked the color. I liked the colors that I had going on, and so I just kept it. Even after finishing this whole thing, I still feel like I could have had even more contrast with light and dark and just the colors in general. Like I said, I wanted to add red, I just wasn't sure how, and I didn't want to ruin it. Maybe the next time I do a clay week, I will add another layer on top of this, maybe with an animal in it or something, maybe some flowers or something. I don't know. You can see that I kept placing the 2 layers over each other so that I could keep comparing the contrast and the colors and stuff. Because I didn't want the trees to look like they were completely different trees. Like, I wanted the 2 halves to, fit together. And so I kept comparing the colors and the shadows and the contrast of the light and the dark in the trees, making sure that it looked as layered and, giving it depth as possible. But there were also times when I would go over something and think to myself, man, I shouldn't have done that. And then you try to fix it and you keep just making it worse, That kept happening a lot with this little section right here, which sucked. But it ended up being okay. I think I figured it out enough. Good enough. Not perfect. But that's how you learn. You make mistakes and you make a mental note not to do that again. Even though as an artist I continue to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. I think that something that was definitely very helpful was the fact that this purplish blue that I'm using right now was very, very transparent. It was very thin, and so I was able to use that to layer over my background whenever I needed to make it seem more, further back. I even used it on these inner trees right here to make it look like I had another layer attached. But it was very difficult to make sure that these ones weren't as pale as the ones in the back, I still wanted the ones in the back to have some color so that you knew they were trees, So it was a very, very difficult thing to balance properly. But once everything was done, I finished up all my final touches. Everything was shaded and looked like it had enough depth to it, and the texture of the clay helped as well with that, with the leafy trees and bushes and stuff. But anyway, once I was done with all of that, I was able to paint the insides of the cutouts, if that makes sense, if you know what I'm talking about. The parts of the clay that were still visible and, very bright and stuff. So I just painted over those with brown, almost black, as dark as it is, to add some more depth to it. And this part was really tricky because I kept having to use water to water it down to make it spread more evenly and not look chunky and stuff. But it was also really hard trying to keep the paint off of the front of this so that it wouldn't ruin the painting that I just did. So that was tricky, and I had to keep going back and checking on it and wiping off any wet paint that made its way to the front. And then I just super glued the 2 pieces together, that way they don't fall apart, And this is how it turned out. I think it turned out pretty well. It's not my favorite work of art that I've ever done, but I'm still very proud of it. It looks very nice. Don't forget to tag Samlescreations on social media and share your work. I hope you have a wonderful day, and happy crafting!